And now, live from Level 5 Productions on the island of Milleronia, it's The Larry Miller Show. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and everyone who just doesn't like to be an April Fool. And who does? Hiya, folks. Welcome back to the Larry Miller Show. I'm Larry Miller, but in a way, aren't we all? Boy, oh boy, it was beautiful today here on Milleronia, and it's so good to be back. I love Milleronia. True, it's my island. True, I made everything on it. And true, I run things, well, in a strict but fair fashion. But boy, oh boy, it's just great to be back. And Colonel Jeff feels the same way. And here we are. And of course, we've got Ozzy and Maggie, the doggies, and my wife. And oh boy, and just Milleronia is a great place. And yes, there are rules to follow, but that's the way it is. Yes, I make the rules, but that's the way it is too. And I do say again, strict but fair. And if I had, well, a family crest, in fact, you know what? I could. This is my island. Yeah, you know what? Because that'll be the slogan on it: strict but fair. And they'll be, instead of like lions raging, when that thing where they have their paws, the front paws up, and they're kind of almost standing up, really, one against the other. I think we'll have doggies. I think we'll put our doggies there, and we'll have a great local artist, who will sketch those, and then a great local sewing guy or woman or anyone who can do that. And on Milleronia, people can do all sorts of things. Yes, it's true. They have to. They can because they're asked to. But you know what? I think I'll do that. I think that'll be a good family crest for me on Milleronia. And in any case, it's so good to be back. And the music, as always, makes me happy. That's, of course, the Olaf Weghorst Orchestra and the Lorraine Berner Dancers, featuring boy tenor Don Riley asking the musical question, if Casey would rap with a strawberry blonde, would the band play on? And I read that in rhythm. And if Casey would rap with a strawberry blonde, would the band play on? Well, first of all, Don, good question. And I say that because also, initially, neither Colonel Jeff nor I had the slightest idea what that meant. And then he cracked the case. That's right, because he looked it up. The song is, and it sounded like the rhythm of it, the song is, Casey would waltz with a strawberry blonde, and the band played on. He'd glide across the floor with the girl he adored, and the band played on. His brain was so loaded it nearly exploded. The poor girl would shake with alarm. He'd ne'er leave the girl with the strawberry curls, and the band played on. So, and that's kind of a neat song. I don't know when that's from. It feels like about, 1900. It has something that has that feel to it. And, but it's a good song. And so Don wanted to know if Casey would rap with a strawberry blonde, would the band play on? Yes, Don. Yes, it would. It absolutely would. Certainly here on Milleronia, because I would tell it to. But you know what? I think they'd play on anyway. Thank you, Don. Don Riley, good question. And we learned something, which is always, you know what? It's always important, more than you think. And by the way, I mentioned, Olaf Weghorst, who was a fine actor who played Swede Larson, the blacksmith, in a very good movie, but I can't tell you about it now. Soon. And Lorraine Berner, dancers. And Lorraine wrote in about her son's favorite steak that I'll tell you about also a little later. And that's who they are. And now you know who we are. And by PayPal. That's right, PayPal. Boy, again, just a terrific group, a terrific company. If you enjoy my show, and why wouldn't you, and you'd like to send a few bucks here to help out, and why wouldn't you, you can do it through PayPal. And, well, I like them a lot. But instead of saying donate or pay what you like, I like to say, buy us some drinks. That's the best way to do it, because there are different levels. Levels 1 through 5, all the way up to...
We're driving to Florida!
Boy, that guy would play on himself, by the way, not just the band. So you know what, though? Do that, though. What you can do is, to get to PayPal, by the way, yes, you can get there through your computer or on your iPhone or 100 different ways, but don't bother with that. Go to our website. Go to LarryMillerPodcast.com. Who's on the mountain? Tom Mix. Boy, that sounds like a police car on Mars. They're strict, but not as strict as we are on Milleronia. And do that, though. Go to our website. And you know what? We have a banner that says PayPal. Click on that banner. And, well, as always, every little bit helps us keep the old leg lamp lit. Anyway, thanks, folks. And that brings me to my favorite part of the show, the joke of the week. This is a good one that Colonel Jeff and I got a good laugh out of, and I hope you do too. In Dublin, in Ireland, there are two fellas walking along the street, and, well, they both have shovels, and they're both friends, and they walk down one whole side of the street, and the first guy, Seamus, just digs a hole, and then he moves on about 50 feet, and the other guy behind him, Paddy, just fills it in. And they keep doing this. Seamus digs a hole every 50 feet. Paddy fills it up right behind him. And they go down the whole street doing this and then cross the street and go back the other way doing the same thing. Seamus digs the hole. Paddy fills it in. And they get, past a pub around the middle of the block. And, well, the publican, the bartender, comes out with the big apron around him and says, hey, fellas, hold on a second here. I've been watching you down that side of the street, and they come down this side, and one of you digs a hole, the other one fills it in. What's this mean? What is this about? Why are you doing this? And Seamus says, well, this is normally a 3-man job, but the guy who plants the trees called in sick today. We got a kick out of that. That's good. That's a good, silly joke. And it made me laugh, and it made Colonel Jeff laugh. And by the way, that was sent in by a fan of the show, Chris Smilich. So thank you, Chris. It's a good one. Remember, folks, save jokes. Jokes are like good music and good classical music. If it's good, keep it going. Just don't leave it on a shelf somewhere. So if you like that one, tell it to a friend or a loved one or someone in your family. And that brings me to my second favorite part of the show, the Poetry Corner. This is a lovely poem called A Song of Success by the great Robert William Service. And you may know that name, and you should. He was known as the Bard of the Yukon. And don't say things like, well, how many poets are there in the Yukon? Well, plenty. Well, at least 3, 6. But Robert William Service was a great one. He lived from 1874 to 1958. And his best-known poem is The Shooting of Dan McGrew. This was in his first book, Songs of a Sourdough. And this was interesting. Colonel Jeff saw this under his name. His first verse that he wrote was when he was 6 years old. And it goes like this. God bless the cakes and bless the jam, bless the cheese and the cold boiled ham, bless the scones Aunt Jeannie makes, and save us all from belly aches. Now, I think that's pretty terrific. He was 6 years old. Come on. I mean, I don't think William Shakespeare could have written something like that at 6 years old, and he's the best of all time. But you know what? Robert Williams Service could. And here's a poem of his called A Song of Success. Ho! We were strong, we were swift, we were brave. Youth was a challenge and life was a fight. All that was best in us gladly we gave, sprang from the rally and leapt for the height. Smiling is love in a foam of spring flowers. Harden our hearts to him. On, let us press. Oh, what a triumph and pride shall be ours. See where it beacons, the star of success. Cares seem to crowd on us, so much to do, new fields to conquer, and time's on the wing. Gray hairs are showing a wrinkle or two. Somehow our footstep is losing its spring. Pleasures forsaken us, love ceased to smile. Youth has been funeraled, age travels fast. Sometimes we wonder, is it worth while? There, we have gained to the summit at last. Aye, we have triumphed. Now must we haste, revel in victory. Why? What is wrong? Life's choicest vintage is flat to the taste. Are we too late? Have we labored too long? Wealth, power, fame we hold. Ah, but the truth! Would we not give this vain glory of ours for one mad, glad year of glorious youth? Life in the springtide and love in the flowers. Isn't that nice? That's lovely. And very moving, too. Yeah, it's a good question. Would we not give this vain glory of ours for one mad, glad year of glorious youth? Good question, folks, for all of us. And yes, I think we would. And why not? And that brings me to my third favorite part of the show, the Magic Movie Moment. I love this section too because I love movies and so do you. And you know what? It's wonderful to know when certain parts in certain movies really do something to you and make you light up, make your eyes shine. It could be just a line, it could be part of a love story, it could be a fight, it could be anything. And then, by the way, this movie has them all. It's called El Dorado from 1967, directed by the great Howard Hawks, starring John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, James Caan, Arthur Honeycutt, Ed Asner, Charlene Holt, R.G. Armstrong, Paul Fix, Johnny Crawford, Christopher George, and so many others, including Olaf Weghorst. That's right, who played, well, Swede, the blacksmith. And I'm sorry, I just paused there because it makes me smile. It's wonderful to have. You can see the casting people say, no, it's the character's the Swede. No, no black hair. His name is the Swede. You dope. Get someone like Olaf Weghorst. And they did. It's a terrific movie, folks. And, oh boy, to see John Wayne and Robert Mitchum together, and John Wayne and James Caan together, and though that cast, Arthur Honeycutt is a great actor. You'll recognize him in a second. And when you see it, and, well, of course, Ed Asner, good Lord, and Charlene Holt, and if you're a fan of the great show, The Rifleman, starring Chuck Connors, and I am, and so is Colonel Jeff, well, Paul Fix and Johnny Crawford are in this movie, and Paul Fix played the sheriff, Micah, and Johnny Crawford played Mark, Lucas's son. That's pretty good to have them in this movie and then in that terrific TV show. Well, that was before the movie, because this movie's from 1967. See it if you haven't. It's a terrific Western. And it has, well, great fight scenes. You know, yes, I'm a big John Wayne fan. I don't know how you can, when he leans back and punches someone, that's a punch. What is a punch? And it's just a terrific movie anyway. And the magic movie moment for me in this is the big shootout. And they have to plot to do it. And there's a bad guy who's trying to take the land from the McDonald family. And, oh boy, and because he needs the water for his cattle. And these folks didn't kid around in those days. I guess folks like this still do it these days, but in those days, they just said, well, let's just get the McDonald's off their land and then make it our land. And by the way, the phrase, get them off, you can put in quotes, because get them off meant get them off the earth, too. Kill them. And then they stand up. They actually hire John Wayne to come by, and he comes in. He's a famous gunfighter. But he gets to town and sees his old friend, Robert Mitchum, who's the sheriff there. And, oh, he's really hit an alcoholic skid. And, boy, oh, boy. And then he finds out from Mitchum and John Wayne that these aren't good people, the ones who hired him. And he winds up going over there and saying, you know what, I think you got the wrong guy. Don't worry about me in there. They look tense, and they look mad, and they look bad. But, of course, John Wayne doesn't care about this. And the big shootout, folks, oh, boy. It's really well done. And I said the great Howard Hawks directed it, and he is great. So many movies. Look him up. He's one of the handful, even the 2 or 3 greatest directors in Hollywood history. And he makes this a real shootout. And, well, the good guys win, and the McDonald family is saved. And they're saved by John Wayne, who has a bullet in his back near his spine, and by one of the daughters, shot by one of the daughters in the back of the McDonald family in the beginning of the picture. But he can make it, and Robert Mitchum has a bad leg because he's been shot too, but they do it. It's terrific. And this shootout, boy, you know, the way things get filmed, as you know, sometimes it doesn't really excite you. This does. There are a lot of Wyatt Earp movies that have been made with the shootout at the OK Corral, and a lot of them don't work. A lot of them don't interest you. Boy, that shootout is really something, too. And so is this one here, and it's beautifully made. The Big Shootout from El Dorado. If you haven't seen this movie, please do. And if you've seen it, but it's been a long time, see it again. Wow. Howard Hawks, John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, and so many great others. That's a good magic movie moment for today. El Dorado. Boy, see it. And let us know what you think. And you know why? And I mentioned also there that, about who doesn't want to be a fool on April Fool's Day? And I looked it up because I wanted to say, wait a minute, where does April Fool's Day come from? And the truth is that it doesn't actually come from any place. And what I mean by that is that, well, it starts around the 16th century, and it goes around Europe, and it starts, well, here in France and here in England, and then it just stays around. That's one of the amazing things. Colonel Jeff and I were talking about that. There are no laws. There are no brochures on April Fool's Day. And, well, it doesn't seem to mean what I thought it meant. I thought April Fool's meant that in those days, in medieval times, and then into the Renaissance, that every town in Europe, all over England, France, Italy, Germany, every place and every town had, they didn't have asylums. And a lot of them didn't have governments, and a lot of people didn't know what do they do with, well, their folks in the family who are a little crazy and don't really take care of themselves well and can't. In other words, what they called fools. They didn't put them away in an institution. Nobody had an institution. They didn't know how. So every town had fools, 5, 6, 7 fools. And they'd wander through the streets. And that on April Fool's Day, I thought that was when they finally get to rule, that became the custom, that all the fools were listened to, and all the fools were respected, and all the fools got a robe and a crown, and they could walk around being folks who ran things for a day. And they were still out of it. They didn't quite know what they were doing, but people would do that and give them what to eat and give them a big giant mug of beer or something. And then, well, of course, after April Fool's Day, they take the robe and the crown back. And there they go wandering around again. But that's what I thought it was, and it's not. And it's an old custom from royalty and, gee whiz, folks who were just, Charles the Ninth in France, and they would really do things. Maybe people like, who would, that's why that one stood out to me. The King of France at that time, in 1560, he became the King of France. And then about 10 years later, he massacred all the Protestants. And there's no other way to say that. And that was at the advice of his mother, Catherine de' Medici. Now, I had heard that name before. Wow, she was, these were some tough people who, didn't care a lot for things like, how about live and let live? And that's the way it goes. So April Fool's Day, I've never been someone who wanted to put a kick me sign on someone's back in second grade. I'm not a big prankster, and I don't like it pulled on me, or I don't like pulling it on anyone else. And these old traditions, if that's the right word for it, about April Fool's Day, of telling a friend his shoelace is untied when it's not untied. And, okay, if you say so, but you know what? I like my thought of maybe it's just the day that everyone who's on the outs gets a robe and a crown and gets to march around all day and have people smile at him. Actually, that wouldn't be a bad holiday right there, would it? Because I mentioned Lorraine Berner wrote in that about her son's favorite steak. I asked last week about, what's your favorite steak? I have 2 favorite steaks in my life, and Lorraine wrote in that my son swears the best steak he ever had was at Fleming's in Walnut Creek. Because, you see, we forget things like a great meal every so often. It doesn't have to be a fancy meal. I've talked about that for the last few weeks, that, boy, every so often you sit down in a place, it's a coffee shop, and you think, wow, they make a terrific thing here. And it's great to notice that. And it reminded me, I've always, not so often, over the years, every so often I'll order a nice steak in a fancy restaurant, and it's never that good. I don't know about you guys, but even the fancy steak in the fancy restaurant is always, it's okay, but it's usually 3 inches thick and just fills a whole platter. It's because people like size. Look at the size of this thing. It's like the tire from an Escalade. And you know what? That's never been that good to me. And I remembered a couple that were really something. I remembered that my wife and I, for instance, were in New York, and we brought the kids, and they were just little, and she and I were going to see a play, and one of her friends just was going to, watch the kids, and that was great for us. So we had, kind of a night off in New York, and the first thing we wanted to do was we went to 21, which, talk about fancy places. Well, that's from Prohibition days, and when liquor wasn't legal, which didn't seem to stop anyone, by the way. You must know that now. And 21 still is just a terrific place, and was one of the big fancy places in those days when, well, they were illegal. You couldn't have places. And 21, they were very nice to us once, and that we went in there. This is before the steak. And they, said hello, and they recognized me, and one of the fellows there said, "Hey, let me show you the place." And he took us around before we sat down, and what a terrific place. It's right where it was, well, during Prohibition. And he took us into a hallway in the back, not too far from the kitchen, but a hallway with just brick walls, and it wasn't used in the restaurant. It was just and the bricks were so old, they were all kind of pockmarked with brick holes, and there was a coat rack there with old wire hangers, and he said, "Let me show you this." And he took one of the hangers off. Well, why are we standing here? And he unwound it and put part of the hanger, now that was straight, into one of the holes on the brick wall, and that was a secret latch from Prohibition, and he could push that, it clicked, and that brick wall just opened about a foot, and then he pushed it, and it was, well, perfectly balanced and perfectly hung, and he opened it up, and we walked in with him there behind him, and thought, how do you like this? Get a load of this. There are stories I'm sure you have about places that were in the back in libraries that made bars, and you went down 4 steps and turned left, and suddenly, look at this, you're in a bar. Well, this place was like that. We went into that room, and this is the first place through that brick wall was a place where, people could sit down around a table, and it wasn't being used there, although you still could, if you wanted to. You could say, "Hey, what's it cost I want to throw a dinner for 10 friends at that table behind the brick wall?" This place was terrific, and you really felt kind of cool. You've seen it in movies, and boy, in those days when liquor was illegal, Robert Benchley and a lot of his folks from writing and performing and so many other great things, but Benchley once walked in there in a huge rainstorm, and he was a regular there, and he walked into 21, and they said, "Boy, it's really coming down out there." And he said, "Yes, I'd like to get out of these wet clothes and into a dry martini." And that became known as, well, that's a pretty witty thing to say. And that was known, well, till today, I'm telling you. And we went there this one night, our big night out, and my wife and I walked in, and we knew the place already, and we liked it. And we felt kind of special being able to go there. And we walked into the dining area that you've seen in a lot of movies. And they sat us down, and we sat there. And we felt like, tonight, let's do something special. We thought, let's have a steak. I bet this place can make a good steak. And we said that to the waiter. We ordered a cocktail. We ordered 2 martinis each. We ordered 2 martinis. And we were going to get some kind of appetizer, and then we said to him, we feel like a steak tonight. Do you have a good steak and one you want to recommend? And he immediately said, "You know what? It's not on the menu, but do you like rib steaks?" And, well, who doesn't like a rib steak? And he said, "We have 2 left. And as I said, it's not on the menu, but you know what? If that's what you want, let me go get those now and have them put aside. And I'll make you a nice steak dinner with these 2. And we just said, well, this is a place, well, you can trust. And if they say, let's go, turn left here, turn left. And we immediately said, yes, thanks. And he just said medium rare and this and that. And we just said, go get them. Just do it. Make it the way you know how. And he put on the side of that thing some spinach, and they'll do anything there. Grits, which I love, and then he opened a bottle of wine, a really good bottle of wine. That wasn't a $1 zillion bottle of wine, by the way. And folks, my wife and I, he put those steaks down, and I'm telling you, we cut into that. There was no bone, and it was these two things, and it wasn't 3 inches thick. It was just right. It was just about the right size you want. You would want. I wanted. My wife wanted. And we looked at it. We cut into it and cut a bite off, and we, popped it in and started chewing. And folks, we looked at each other and just our eyes widened. It was the best steak I had ever had. And my wife, too. We said, holy mackerel. And we cut another bite and ate that, and it's just our eyes rolled, and then took, a nice forkful of the grits or the spinach and a sip of this terrific wine. We ate that whole steak, and it wasn't giant. It wasn't, the size of a tire. It was just right. And we sat there. We weren't overfilled. We were just right. It was so good. And we just sat there drinking. Well, we polished off that bottle of wine. And we sat there drinking the last glass. And the waiter said, anything for dessert? And he already knew, and we already knew. No, not now. No, thank you. That was the best steak in the history of America. And he smiled and said, you know what? Those are good, aren't they? I wish we had more. And we said, well, someday we'll be back again, and we'll ask you for it. And folks, and we since did, by the way. I've been back on work there a couple of times, and I went in there, and I always ask, but they never had them again. And that was a pretty good steak. That was a holy mackerel steak. That was, wait a minute, this is really crazy. It's so good. And that is something I and my wife have never forgotten. That's one of my 2 favorite steaks ever. And the other one was I was working in a movie called Necessary Roughness, which is a good movie too. And it's, terrific cast. And, oh boy, Scott Bakula and Holly Jane Kozak, some terrific people. And me. And one of those nights, it was shooting at one of the universities about 35 miles north of Dallas. And I borrowed a movie car. I wanted to go. I had heard from other cast members and from the director that they have steak places on the way to Dallas. They have, big Texas steak places. Do you need anything more than that as a description, by the way? I don't think you do. I didn't. I went down that road, and it was still light out, and I was off early that day from shooting this part, and which is a good movie too. And I went, and I was there alone, and I put on, a sport jacket, shirt, tie. I thought, even though it's a Tuesday or Wednesday, I should look nice to go get a big Texas steak. And I went in there, and I found out just in time, this is one of those places, if you have a tie, if you're wearing a tie, they cut it off. And I'm telling you, they don't say they're about to. They don't warn you. They don't say, we always do this. The waiter comes up, grabs it, and he has a big set of shears. These aren't scissors to cut your fingernails. That thing is about 1.5 feet long, that scissors with giant blades, and I'm telling you, they just picks your tie up and cuts it off and leaves you just about 2 inches from the knot down. Well, I wouldn't care about that, but they said one of the folks, they knew I was coming down. I had made a reservation and they knew we were shooting a movie up there. So one of the folks back up front there near where the folks meet you and to sit you down. One of them just saw me and just kind of darted over and said, "I never see this to anyone, but take that tie off now." And he said, "They'll cut it off you." And he just looked at me. First of all, you believe someone like that. Of course, you're not going to say something. I didn't say, "Wait a minute, what are you saying? Why, that's unheard of. That's an outrage." I just said, "Got it." I took it off and folded it and put it in the inside pocket of the jacket there and unbuttoned the top of my shirt. And I saw people, they do it. Remember, they don't warn you. They don't do anything. Hey, this is Texas, folks. And that's the habit there. You don't wear a tie in this place. And this joint, by the way, they had a band playing, about 100 feet away. This is a big place. And it was playing really well. And it wasn't too loud, which I liked, because you could think. And I sat there, and you know how good the steaks were? First of all, about 9 hours before, they were on 4 hoofs. They have them in the back, and that's what they use to make their steaks. And meaning they kill them. And so I think that's as fresh as a steak happens. And they brought me one. I said to the waiter, "I'd like this." And I said, is that a good thing to order? He said, "You know what? You'll be happy with this. Trust me." It's the same sort of thing. He said, "Let me make you something." He put a baked potato on it. And the same thing, they give you something green and some green beans, and that's steak. And I'm telling you, I didn't have to you can get whatever you want. You can salt it or put ketchup on it. I'm telling you, folks, I cut a bite of that steak, and I almost slid down that chair. It was so good. And it was just me at this table for 4 usually. And I thought, holy mackerel. That steak in 21 was so good, it was insane. But I'm telling you, this fresh steak in Texas, in a restaurant where they'll cut the tie right off you, was the best steak I've ever had. And I couldn't even it was pretty big, too. I didn't finish it. I took it back to the hotel where we were all staying. And I said, holy mackerel. And I had one drink beforehand with that. And that's not by the way, you can get whatever you want, but that's not a martini place. I got some whiskey, neat, and Jameson, by the way, if you're curious. If you're going to have whiskey, how do you not go with something Irish, by the way? Is that fair to say? Well, let's see. They have one from Pakistan. Get the Irish one, okay? And I had a nice one of those, and they're not shy with the drinks. I didn't say make it a double. It was a triple, and in a glass that could take it. So you pick it up, well, you feel like a man. You feel like a grown-up. And I had that one drink which makes your eyes roll. That was terrific. And I didn't even need a bottle of wine with that. After that drink with the steak, a big, tall Coke with ice is just perfect. But I'm telling you, that steak, 2/3 of that steak came back with me to the hotel. And the part I had in that restaurant knocked me out. And one of these days, I guess I could go back to that place next time I'm working, 30 miles north of Dallas. But I'll tell you what, folks, there are places out there, and you and I can both find them, where every so often, when you get a little crazy, could be 1 in the afternoon, or it could be 1 in the morning. Who knows where you are? But you feel like a good steak. And I sure felt like one these 2 times. And I hope on the rare occasion when you feel like something just loony, nothing wrong with steak, by the way. I'm just saying when you feel like, holy mackerel, I have a taste for the kind of thing where they cut the tie right off you. 21 in New York. And I'm sorry because you know what? I can't remember the one in Texas. I can't remember the name. And I'd like to say it so you could go there. In fact, do me a favor. If you know the name of that place or places like that, between Dallas and Denning, I think was the place where the university was, where we were shooting this thing. And I think it's about 6 miles north of Dallas. I think 6 or 8 or something like that miles north. But I can't remember the name. If you know the name, please write it in to us and let us know. Whew. I'll know it then, and you'll know it too. We know the same things already. Homer is Homer, and Pluto is a planet. So remember, folks, as always, if you walked out of bed today and had a job to go to and a home to come back to and someone there who cares about you, folks, the game's over and you've won. Go get yourself a good steak. We'll see you here next time.